Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals crafted by the UN for 2030. If you like this video, please subscribe, give it a like, and turn on the bell to be notified when I post a new video. For those of you that haven't heard of the UN, I first want to go over what the UN is, just so we know where we're going with the goals. So, the UN is where you can see diplomacy in action. Countries like the US, China, Japan will send ambassadors to the UN to do problem-solving work. They'll tackle issues such as zero hunger, gender inequality, and things like that. A lot of times it's solving big world issues while focusing on different cultures as well, because you can't just have one answer to it all. It's really dependent on each country and each individual culture. The UN also has many offshoot organizations such as UNICEF, UN Women, UNA-USA, the UN World Food Programme, and these organizations have different missions and different goals, but they're all under the umbrella of the UN itself. So basically, in summary, the UN is a group that works together with diplomats from all over the world to try to solve world problems. However, it ends up with local leaders like you and me to actually accomplish any goals or agendas they set forward, because ambassadors can't do it all, and the UN is not a world government. So it's up to us to effect change in our own communities, but we will have the UN supporting us in that way. Now onto the goals. I'm going to try to put a photo of the SDGs while I'm talking about them so you can see it, but if it isn't possible, it's definitely going to be in my thumbnail, so I hope that helps you out. The first two goals are no poverty and zero hunger, and as you can imagine, these are highly correlated, because if you are very impoverished, you're probably not going to get a lot of food. So these are really lofty goals, but the UN's done a lot of work on these through groups like UNICEF and UN Women to try to figure out how we can accomplish these things, and many communities all over the world are trying to tackle this as well through food pantries and things like that. So it's super important to acknowledge this is an issue that many people struggle with, especially in the US and all over the world. So it's a lofty thing to achieve by 2030, but I definitely hope it happens for everybody. The third and fourth goals are good health and well-being and quality education, and these two goals are also highly correlated, because education is super important, but you can't get educated if you're not in good health and can't go to school or can't use internet or can't do anything like that. So it's super important that we take care of ourselves and we take care of people all over the globe by realizing how different cultures interact with health and well-being, as well as education. This is also super important for girls everywhere all over the world that don't get the opportunity to be educated. So this is something UN Women's working on, but all of us need to work on this and be educated about who isn't getting an education and who isn't being taken care of health-wise. So this is super important in your own community to see where are these things lacking. The fifth and sixth goals are gender equality and clean water and sanitation. And these are highly correlated as well, but maybe you wouldn't think that right away. Gender equality is super important. Men and women, and however you identify, we have to all be seen as equal and be treated the same and given the same opportunities. In the US and all over the world, this is so important, whether that's through pay, healthcare, education. This needs to be addressed. Clean water and sanitation, however, is super important because so many people die from not having clean water and sanitation, and a lot of times getting clean water and sanitation for women all over the world really affects them, because they're the ones getting the water, cleaning the water for people. So that's definitely tied to gender equality, because if they're doing that, they're not getting a time to be educated. So as you can see, all these goals really tie together in one way or another. The seventh and eighth goals are clean and affordable energy and decent work and economic growth. These are super important so people feel valued in their communities and are respected, with making sure they can survive, because the economy is going to grow, and therefore that bolsters the country up to a higher standing in the world. The ninth and 10th goals are innovation, industry and infrastructure, and reduced inequality. These are also tied together, because if the innovation is not happening in your community, that's going to contribute to inequality, because you're not going to be held at the same esteem as other people and not be treated fairly, and this ties with wages. So this is super important and something we all have to advocate for in our own communities, making sure we're constantly innovating so people feel supported and therefore inequality is reduced. The 11th and 12th goals are sustainable communities and cities, as well as responsible consumption and production. These are also tied together, because if architecture isn't sustainably built, this will also lead to unresponsible consumption of products that are hurting the environment. So this is something I've done a video on in the past, so I would check that out to learn more about sustainable production. But it is really cool and they're heavily tied together, so it's so important that we also look for this in our own communities. The 13th and 14th goal are climate action and life below water. As you can imagine, these are heavily tied together because with climate change there's rising sea levels and therefore that affects biodiversity as well as what's below water. Plastic production affects life below water. I could go on and on about this topic. These are so important and related to a lot of the goals we already mentioned. Climate change affects every aspect of life and hurts some people more than others. For people that are more privileged and live in areas that are more protected, they don't suffer the effects of climate change as much as someone who lives in a poorer community and isn't respected by their government. So it's so important that we acknowledge climate change is really the thread throughout all of this. So these goals are so important that we address, because I firmly believe if we can address climate action, we can address all these other goals, because agriculture will be more sustainable and therefore that can address zero hunger if things can be produced in a way that doesn't hurt the planet. The 15th, 16th, and 17th goal is life on land, as well as peace and justice, strong institutions, and partnerships to achieve the goals. These last three are also heavily tied together because when we work together to make sure our communities are more peaceful and just for everybody, that affects how we can partner with other countries and how they see us as a global standing or a leader in a certain area. So life on land as well, like our animals being treated fairly, our people being treated fairly, everything here is intertwined, and it's so important that we work together to achieve all these 17 goals by 2030. We don't have much time at all, but I firmly believe if every one of us works together to achieve these goals, all of us will be better off because our planet will be better off, and we won't be suffering because people are being taken care of and supported by our planet and their own communities. I have a quick question. Are you learning something new? Let me know in the comments below by writing fighter. I think all the goals I mentioned are super important. Now their order from 1 to 17 doesn't mean one's more important than the other, because as you can see, they're all intertwined and reliant on each other. So if we don't tackle climate change at all, that's going to affect life below water, life on land, poverty, zero hunger. It's all there and they're all intertwined. So it's important that each one of us today decides to take on one of the goals in our own way. Maybe you start eating less meat, or you start driving your car less, or you take the bus. All these things really matter, and advocating for yourself and your community. Advocate for people that are displaced. Advocate for people that aren't given the same opportunities you are because of poverty, inequality. It's so important that we do that because this is what the goals are about. We have to be local leaders and advocate for our communities because the UN cannot do it all. They've given us a platform with these goals to achieve, and I really hope we can achieve them by 2030 because everyone will be better off if we can. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was a long one, but I hope it was worth it and you learned something new. Next Friday, there won't be a new video because I have a lot of exams to study for, so I need to make sure I do well on those. If you want to learn about going vegan versus going vegetarian and the benefits of both, click the video right here. Also, take a picture of this screen right now and I'll shout you out on social media. Just tag me on Instagram or Twitter. Lastly, if you like this video, please subscribe, give it a like, and share it with someone who could benefit. Let's make the world a better place.